Welcome back, modern mythographers, everyday adventurers. This is part 2, where I talk about my quest to find the Tasmanian tiger. Now last week, if you haven't seen that episode, I just gave a lot of kind of the background information on the Tasmanian tiger. I apologize if it was kind of all over the place and disjointed. That's kind of how my brain works. But I hope that it helped us prepare and set the scene for the adventure of this week, where I went to Tasmania in August of 2023 to find the Thylacine. Now this is a journey that me and my friend had been planning for a long time. It was our dream to go search for the Thylacine. We had traveled to a lot of different places around the world, South America, Europe, kind of searching into myths and legends and folklore, every once in a while looking into cryptids and missing animals and sort of urban legends as well. But this was the big one. This was the one we had always wanted to do, and we went prepared. My friend, Cole Squires, who also has a channel that talks about these sorts of things, did a lot of research beforehand, and I want to share it with you because I think it was pretty brilliant. Now, we know that the preferred prey of the Thylacine was the Tasmanian native hen. So Cole took the modern distribution of the Tasmanian native hen. It is extremely common in Tasmania nowadays because its main predator, the Thylacine, has been extinct for decades, or at least that's what everybody thinks. The absence of many Thylacines, whether or not they're completely gone, has allowed that population to grow exponentially. So we took the modern range of the Tasmanian native hen, and we took the ancestral range of the Thylacine. Now, instead of trying to find a place where both of those matched up, which is usually in more populated or urban areas, we decided to look somewhere where people didn't often go. We thought that if the Thylacine was still alive, it would be alive in a place that is very, very, very out in the wilderness. Now, there's a particular part of this wilderness in Tasmania referred to as the Thylacine, and it is some of the densest jungle I've ever seen. It feels like this sort of primeval forest where you would find a creature that has once been thought to be extinct. It's just never ending, and you could go to the next stump and the next stump and the next stump, and they're all perfect burrows. I'm telling you, when I was actually there, it was blowing my mind how ancient it felt. All the trees and the animals, the calls of the kookaburra, it was amazing. But anyway, because we decided to look in some of the less populated areas, we went with the border of the Thylacine's ancestral range and the border of the Tasmanian native hen's range as well. Where those borders overlapped is where we decided to go. We decided on a particular place inside of the Thylacine called the Savage River National Park. This is a national park that is incredibly difficult to access. In fact, there are only some 4x4 roads going into this park that occasionally are washed out and inaccessible, something we found out when our boots were actually on the ground. But using Google Maps, we zeroed in on a particular location. We called this the Atlas Plateau. It was a sort of valley-looking place right near the Atlas River that didn't seem to have very much human activity at all. We decided if there was a Thylacine, and it was still alive in Tasmania, this is the place it would be. So armed with our former exploratory experience and our trail cams that we ordered online, we headed out. We took a flight over and landed in the Launceston Airport, rented our car at night, and drove towards the Savage River National Park. Just got our nummy treats, burger rings, Kit Kats, and a whole slew of things, because we're in Tasmania. That's what it is out there. We just went to Coles. Not that Cole, that Cole. Now, it was nighttime when we landed, and unfortunately, the very first thing we learned about Tasmania is that it is the roadkill capital of the world. There were animals all along the road that had been hit by cars, pademelons and wallabies and possums of all type. It really actually hurt the heart to see how many animals were there. But it also showed us that this is an incredibly, incredibly diverse place biologically. Tasmania is about the size of Ireland, and it has 1/10 the population. There are so many open places, and that's something that a lot of people I think don't understand about Tasmania, is there are huge parts of it where humans rarely go. There are very much urban centers as well, but this is not a place where everybody is out in the middle of the Thylacine all the time looking for the Thylacine. This was another encouraging fact that came to mind. Now again, I want to say at this point that we were not convinced the Thylacine was still alive. We wanted it to be, but we went forward with an open mind. In all actuality, the thylacine could absolutely be extinct in Tasmania. I'm all for that as being a possibility, but it didn't stop me in going and looking for myself. So there we went, into the bush, some of the densest bush that I've ever seen, like I said before. It was a surreal experience going into just this dark, primeval jungle in the dead of night, trying to get to the Atlas Plateau, which we ended up not being able to get to that night because it was completely inaccessible. The roads that we had seen on the map included bridges that hadn't existed for years, it looked like. We ran into rivers, we ran into mud holes, we ran into places where trees fell and we couldn't lift them because they were too big and heavy. It was, in all actuality, a freaking fantastic adventure. But it took us a long time to try to find our way to the Atlas Plateau. I started calling it elusive because I thought at one point we were never gonna get there. Okay, so something we're having trouble with is bridges that are gone. And so I'm gonna show you this one. So you can see where the bridge started and went across, and actually the receiving of it over there. I don't know if it got washed out, but that is where the maps told us we were supposed to go. So anyway, we're gonna have to find a different way to get across that river to get to the elusive Atlas Plateau, as we have dubbed it. So we slept in the car. We woke up in the morning and something about the mist and the kookaburra sounds, it was just amazing. And I was grateful already on that very first morning that we had gone on the trip. So Cole and I were talking, and we are pleasantly just satisfied with our theory of our focus on the Atlas Plateau, specifically because it combines kookaburra. It's crazy out here. It combines extensive research with gut feeling and hunches, which in our experience have brought about the most. Oh yeah, look at this road. We're doing a little bit of scouting right now. I just want to make this video. But that's what we feel best about. So anyway, yeah, the combination of those two things I think will bring success. After many, many hours of many backtracks, of almost getting our rental car stuck in the mud multiple times, of moving trees from in front of the road and dodging animals every single second that we were driving, we finally got to the dirt road outside of the Atlas Plateau.
Oh, because there's a gray line on Google Maps doesn't mean it's going to get you there.
Yeah, we cannot express the difficulty of how many roads we went down, how many we got stuck down. Just like the tiny areas we squeezed through, but we finally found it. And we're almost there to the plateau. Now the Atlas Plateau was inaccessible by a road. We had to park the car and hike in to what looked like a road that no one had driven on for maybe 100 years. This was a road that steeply went down into this valley, and it was made of pure quartz. You were walking along a crystal road that had trees growing up in the middle of it, sinking up to your ankles in this water and mud, going into this dense jungle I've been talking about. It was by far one of the furthest places I've been out to in the wilderness, and it was amazing to see because there was no one around. Last night it's not spooky anymore, but it's a really cool road that has not been driven on for a long time. And we like old unused roads in our business, so we will keep you updated on how today goes. It took us hours and we traversed through this forest. We were convinced as we were walking through there, so far from civilization, that if the thylacine is alive, this would be its home. We eventually got to the Atlas Creek, took a break, the farthest point in our journey, placed our trail cams, and then trekked back to the car. We did it. This is it. This is Atlas Creek. The actual Atlas Creek is the most wild place either of us have ever been. And my camera is so fogged up, but you know, that's showbiz, baby. This is some of the most rugged, difficult to traverse terrain I've ever been on in my entire life. I'm here squatted underneath this tree, and this is one of the most spectacular places I've ever seen. I wish the video did it justice, but it just doesn't. My camera is covered with stuff. It's covered with stuff, but look where we freaking are. At that point, we decided it would be most prudent to leave our trail cams there for several days, to not check on them, and to just let it alone. We decided that if there was a creature as elusive as the thylacine, it would be one that would be suspicious of humans all around, and definitely suspicious of humans that came in every single day. So we decided to have a road trip, and we drove all across Tasmania. We set up 2 other trail cams near the first one along the road, and decided to keep one with us so that every night, which we were spending in the car camping, we would set it up somewhere and see what we could find. It turns out we found a lot, but I'll get to that in a second. Some of my favorite places in Tasmania were St. Helens on the eastern coast, Port Arthur, where I ate the best oysters I've ever had. I didn't even know I liked oysters until I tried this type of oyster called Tassie Gold that you can only find in Tasmania, and I actually like dream about it because of how good it is. I'm actually allergic to all other types of oysters except for this one oyster that I had in Tasmania, which kind of sucks because I can't really eat them unless I go back. We stopped in Hobart, the most populated city in Tasmania, because we wanted to go to the zoo. Now, it's not a zoo anymore, it's defunct and abandoned, but we wanted to go to the place where the last thylacine was confirmed to have been seen. Okay, here's the old polar bear exhibit, they say. It's pretty cool. It's not very big, but right on this patch of grass is where Benjamin once stood. We may have had to be a little sneaky, and I won't go into the details of that, but it was kind of a sacred experience, definitely a reverent one, for both of us to stand on the ground exactly where the pen of the very last endling thylacine lived. Supposed Benjamin, supposed male thylacine, as Cole says. But yeah, right in this general area was the last place a thylacine was ever confirmed to be seen, ever. So this is very sacred ground right here. This is amazing. After that, we went all the way down to Southport and then drove as far south as we could and hiked for a couple miles out to get to the southern coast of Tasmania so that we could look straight down and know that there was nothing between us and Antarctica, which is an experience I've never had before. Also, looking into the forests so far out there, it was so apparent that so much of this land is still wild. It's still primeval, and there could be so much out there. I think that because of Google Earth and because we spend a lot of time not out in the wilderness as modern humans, we kind of get this idea that everything has been explored, that we see everything, when in reality, there's so many parts of this planet that are just inaccessible and rarely, if ever, seen by humans. I know that there are a lot of us, but there are millions of square miles of wilderness on this planet. And there could be a lot of stuff in those millions of square miles. It's not something that is particularly intuitive. We like, as humans, to kind of feel like we have a grasp on the globe of what's going on Earth. We say things like, well, if it was still alive, we would have seen it. When in reality, the time that we spend out in the farthest reaches of the wilderness is very, very small amounts of time. In my personal view of cryptozoology, I think a lot of people like to sit down in the comfort of their own homes and feel like we kind of have a general knowledge of everywhere on the planet, but there's a lot of unexplored places, even on a tiny little island below Australia. After that experience at the southern coast, we drove straight up through the middle. There's actually an enormous part of Tasmania that doesn't have very much access at all that is a national park. This is a place that I would like to go back to for maybe future thylacine journeys. It was just a little bit out of our range for this one, and we wanted to concentrate on the Atlas Plateau. This part of Tasmania is also slightly out of the ancestral range of the thylacine, but I think that it definitely warrants future investigation, as well as other places that I'll talk about at the end of this video. Tasmania has to be one of my favorite places I've ever seen in my life. It is amazing. It feels like so many different places melded together, like adventure is just right outside your door. Around every single bend, there's another one. And after seeing so many spectacular places where the history is so present, we made it back to the Atlas Plateau. We checked our footage and we had all sorts of wildlife, including a creature we didn't expect. On the first trail cam we set up in the middle of the wilderness, we saw a cat. There was a cat that came back to our trail cam several times, way out in the Atlas Plateau. And that was something that was interesting to us because this is actually an invasive species. Wild cats live in Tasmania and they actually have been dangerous to a lot of the smaller marsupial animals there. This is another example of how specifically European peoples brought invasive species to pristine locations like this and it upset the ecosystem. Now, I'm not saying all of these historical people that did all of these things accidentally are horrific people, but the things themselves have had horrific consequences. Now, we did not find evidence of the thylacine on this trip. That is something that I was hoping for, but something that I was prepared for. I am kind of split between the idea of the thylacine being completely extinct or maybe still existing in relic populations in Tasmania. What I am certain of is that the thylacine still lives somewhere else. Papua New Guinea is also an ancestral home of the thylacine. It also has much, much less population density than either Australia or Tasmania. Many more dense jungles and reports of thylacines. If you've liked these two videos, I might make one in the future where I go more into depth into these sightings that have happened in the last almost 100 years. Some of them are fascinating, some of them are very convincing, and some of them might be stories worth telling. Thanks for spending some moments with me as I've talked about my own experiences. I like to keep this channel kind of unscripted and open, where I'm just kind of like telling you the stories of where I've been, what I've done. Again, if you like this stuff, subscribe, like it. I'm always kind of changing the channel to make it more adventurous, more fun, and at least worth your time. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'm Levi, and this is Outlandish.